sense. All right. So we are live. That's why people were filling in, because I have to press that button first. I was like, gosh, is nobody going to come? Do I need to like make sure the
Open
links
the
are
door.
right? Hi, everyone. Really look forward to chatting with you all. Please feel free to say hi in the chat. I'm going to give it a couple minutes here, and then we'll jump in. Please keep in mind this is recorded, so if you're not able to stay the whole time, or you're talking to one of your friends and they really wanted to see it, we will have this hosted probably by the end of the week on our YouTube channel, and then a recording will go out to everyone as well. But really appreciate having you all here today. Let us know where you're coming from in the chat if you like. I see at least one of my team members. Austin, Norway. What time is it in Norway? Bend, Kansas City. I love that city. A lot of people from all over the place. Barcelona. That makes sense. People work late there, right? All right. Gonna give it 1.5 more minutes. Oh gosh, there's more messages than I can read. Thank you all for saying hi in the chat. Seems like people from all over the place, really exciting. Is the weather nice for all of you guys? It got like very cold where I am in Spokane.
It's about 80, 85 here, so it's not bad.
Oh man, that sounds amazing.
70 in Arizona. Randy, that's cold there, isn't it? But you're up in the mountains, I think. So, all right. Well, why don't we get started? Really appreciate having everyone here for our revenue management roundtable. This is our 4th session and something that we do monthly, where we bring on a number of revenue managers in the space who work professionally with portfolios kind of all over, and we just talk about the nitty-gritty of what's going on in markets today. You know, we ask them to come up with examples and just talk about what they're seeing in their current market, what they're expecting to happen going forward, and we let the conversation kind of go from there. My name is John DeRoulet. I'm the head of onboarding and revenue management at Wheelhouse. I have been a revenue management for over a decade now, and really have an opportunity to talk with a lot of folks and enjoy it. Tom, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Tom Lyons with Casago. Casago, we have about over 4,800 properties. I oversee everything when it comes to revenue management. I've been in the industry for over 20 years, going back all the way to 9/11 and 2008, 2013. So used to downturns, used to upturns. So be excited. I'm very excited to be here.
Meaghan?
Yeah, hi, I'm Meaghan. I'm based in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I'm the executive director of the Outpost group, and our largest business in the portfolio that we have is Outpost Vacation Rentals, which we have 250 properties all located in Jackson, and not as long as John and Tom, but 8 years, almost 9 years in the industry. It was my first job out of college, so I guess it's like the only thing that I've ever known and done. Started in reservations and ran a revenue team at 360 Blue for several years.
Awesome. Thank you. Destiny, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Destiny. I'm the finance manager for Oak Island Accommodations located in Oak Island. So I oversee revenue management, marketing, and then the finance division. We have just shy of 500 vacation rentals and then about 50 long-term rentals. So pretty interesting.
Awesome. And Heather?
Hi, my name is Heather Richer with RicherLogic. Our organization provides revenue management and distribution support to the short-term rental, vacation rental industry, operators of small size all the way up to thousands of units in the US, outside the US. And my partner and I founded this business because we really saw the need for
revenue management expertise in this industry. It's still kind of in its infancy, is kind of our point of view. And we've done revenue management our whole career, resorts, hotels, casinos, restaurant revenue management. And so it's been a ton of fun for us to apply it and really see how it's evolved in our industry, in this industry. So that's
Awesome.
me.
Thanks, Heather. Well, really appreciate having you all on today. Let's just kind of get started. Last time when I had a group on here, we had, just finished spring break, and the big conversation about like, how did you feel about spring break happened? But, we've had that kind of like period after spring break. Meaghan, you can kind of tell us, because I think you might have some units that have very different seasonality than some of the, high summer stuff, but I'd be interested to hear about that. But, we've had this period leading up into summer. It's a high season for a lot of people. How have things been going in your portfolios, and what have you been looking at over the past 30, 60 days? Why don't we start with Meaghan?
Sure. Things have been going really well. I will not lie. I think that beginning fall of this past year, there was definitely some anxiety that started to set in. And I think that's just primarily from the downturn that we saw compared to what COVID was like, returning to that new normal. And everyone that I've talked to has really felt that. And we're starting to really come out of that. And I guess two things that I've noticed really specifically that have surprised me is the booking window has shrank significantly over the last several months even, and is continuing to shrink. And the price sensitivity on the consumer side has continued to grow, which, I mean, even back in the day, I know that you get calls all the time asking for discounts, but I think even more so now, it has started to really increase.
Do you guys, can you tell us a little bit about your seasonality too? And maybe that's something, as you all kind of speak, you can tell us a little bit about where you are in the cycle of what's coming up and what just passed.
Yeah, so it initially surprised me coming into the Jackson market compared to the Panhandle of Florida, just because I had considered it to solely be a winter destination. But because we have really close access to Grand Teton National Park and Yellowstone National Park, summer is actually peak season. This year, winter was amazing just because of the snowfall that completely crushed every single destination. I think actually, I'm not even going to limit it to one, but summer and winter. So we do pretty well year round, with the exception of just a couple months, April and November, most specifically. And then of course have a great spring break as well.
Awesome. Who'd like to jump in next?
I'll jump in. It's been an interesting year. I feel like just about the time we get a handle on trends that are coming, something new pops up. Really like Meaghan, when we were closing out last year, we were very nervous about what this year would bring. We focused and increased a lot of our marketing efforts, and it paid off because we really didn't need it. We haven't had too much of an impact that I've heard other people, even in coastal destinations, talking about. And we've really been able to increase our revenue, but our lead times are actually growing. People are booking further out and in advance, and that definitely caught us off guard a bit in the first quarter.
That's very interesting. Are you, when you're seeing these bigger lead times, when you kind of planned your rates last year, were you planning a lot of growth? Are you seeing a lot of ADR growth?
Yeah.
So you're seeing both increased lead times and ADR growth in your portfolio?
Yes, as well. Our summer, the only time that our lead time is actually decreasing is in the summer. So we're looking now, at the possibility that we're maybe training people to wait for our prime season, because we're very seasonal in our area. Mid-June to mid-August is where we see a majority of our revenue and a majority of our occupancy come in. And then once kids go back to school, everything falls off a cliff, and we're really fighting for any rental that we can get.
That makes sense. And just briefly, what kind of marketing activities did you guys invest in?
From a monetary perspective, we didn't invest much. We've really just honed in on targeted marketing, increasing our marketing efforts, and a lot of people are probably already doing this, but just tightening up, having our revenue management and marketing department meet weekly and review those KPIs and see where we need to go.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm sure we'll come back to that.
John, I got a couple minutes if you don't mind. I'll talk a little bit about our markets. I'll try to give you guys some nuggets too, that actions that could help you guys in each market, because we're in about 50 different markets and each market is different. So you got to take that in consideration. One person might say we're doing great. Other person might say, hey, we're not doing well. What we're seeing in different markets, we have some markets that are doing well, some markets that are rain showers, some markets that are thunderstorms, and then some markets that are tsunamis. So you have to take those all in consideration because we're seeing that across the board. A lot of the drive markets that were really good with COVID, that they can drive in radius from in the state or a little outside the state. Those markets seem like they're more getting back to 2019 numbers, not that drastically low, but we're starting to see that a little bit when it comes to supply. The supply is just a real big deal. And I encourage everyone on this, listening to us here, is really understand your supply. I go around and talk to people all the time and I ask, hey, how much new supply came in your market? And many times you just don't know. You really need to know that. When supply has increased dramatically, 26% last year compared to this year, it's going to be a little less, but that was a peak last year. You have to really understand that. Now, when demand's doing great, it can outpace supply. However, when demand is going down, and if it's converting back to 2019, again, not to those levels, but a mixture of 2019, 2022 numbers, it really can hit you pretty hard. And you have to understand how much new supply is coming in, where you have to be able to pace yourself, your pricing, your strategies, everything come into play when it comes to that. I really agree with your point on the booking windows. Last year we seen 14 days and under was 33% of the bookings were 14 days and under. It's a pretty big deal. We see the same thing happening this year. I agree also with price sensitivity is higher than ever. I know we're going to probably talk a little bit about fees today, but price sensitivity when it comes to fees, because customers today don't value fees, but they value price. So what that means is that a customer is going to compare you to another property. They're going to look at your price to their price. Even if it's higher, they're going to perceive that as value to them because it's part of the product they're buying. They don't look at fees that way. So I encourage everybody today to kind of look at your fee structure, make sure your fees are in line with your competition, make sure you have a percent threshold. I see some competitors that are 86% of the rate comes in fees. That's way too high. So you might be pricing yourself or using a pricing tool that are very effective, but you might be pricing yourself out of the market when it comes to fees. Lastly, because every market is different and you have downturn markets, we have a tendency to look at last year. Hey, how are we doing to last year? Really in the hotel business where I came from, it's really about RevPAR and RevPAR share. So I encourage everyone to have like an LSI data, our key data, so you're looking at those things consistently. So we always look weekly as how is our RevPAR compared to the competition? Are we getting our fair share? We like to always we look at 100% would be fair share. We like to be in the 120s, 130s on share. You can also look at your booking window share. What is your booking window lead time to your competition? If your booking window is a lot further out and you're getting a lot of volume in that booking window, your rates might be too low. So you got to look at that, or likewise the other way around. So in the market, when it is, some markets are doing great, you might not have to use some of these tools, but in this day's economy, some of these tools are going to help you grow your portfolio. And the ultimate goal is not looking really at last year, but looking at how are you performing in the marketplace, understanding who your competitors are and how are you performing, and looking at to say, how am I going to beat them when it comes to RevPAR? I said a lot there, so
Maybe I'll just jump in on,
Yeah.
I was trying to read the chat too to kind of respond. So the one question was like, where do you go? So I'm just gonna kind of go through a general list. If you're trying to understand like supply in your market, like accommodations industry. Tom mentioned LSI key data. Transparent is another data provider. They were purchased by OTA Insights, which is a hotel data provider. So there's OTA Insights, Transparent, AirDNA. Many people know you can get some supply nuggets out of that product. And then Calibri Labs is another hotel product. And Smith Travel, which is in the hotel industry, STR, Smith Travel Research, is been tracking hotel supply for decades. But depending on your inventory mix, you might want to understand supply for just short-term rental, vacation rental, or it may benefit you to also understand supply changes on the hotel side as well. And then someone mentioned owner communication. So also getting ahead of it, right? If you can get that information and you know it, to be proactive about telling your investors, stakeholders, this is the condition of our market. So that just some examples, but wanted to add to what Tom said.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, Tom. Heather, do you want to keep going and kind of tell us about what you've been seeing in some of the markets you're operating in?
I guess I think your original question was about summer. And so definitely seeing different approaches, if summer is your low season versus summer is your high season. And some of the data, I think the high season ones are honestly like trickier, because you could say, well, I'm going to look at myself versus last year. Am I pacing to myself? But then how am I pacing versus how the market is pacing? And kind of making a decision, on that. There's, again, like with revenue management, it's always very gray, but if you can get a handle on, well, the market is down 10%, I'm only down 3%. So I am winning, right? But if you're like, but I don't want to even be down 3%. So then, you can kind of say, are you going to reassess? And are you going to even price lower than you did last year? It's high season. Now you're considering pricing lower than last year. That's another one that might trigger owner communication. But if you can, evaluate that ultimately this is the strategy that's going to drive more revenue. But those are hard decisions, right? To even think that in a high season month, you would start to price lower than previous. But some of the markets are having a pretty big fall off a cliff post-COVID, right? Even when summer's high season. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's all really wonderful. I do want to kind of come back to what Tom said about the historical data, because I do think when I talk with clients, I do still use a lot of historical data. Particularly around occupancy pacing. I want to know how I'm pacing compared to my previous year.
Sure.
And, it's all kind of triangulation, but also know how I'm pacing against the market. Because like you said, I've talked to a number of revenue managers and they're like, I'm beating the market pace, but I'm like way behind my own pace. It's like, well, all internally as revenue managers, we do the math. It means we're going to be like super down, right? And that means we might want to do something. It's like, maybe I need to beat the market pace. Like you said, Heather, maybe I need to make a decision to do that. I've noticed something with a partner I work with really closely in Savannah, where, he's in a very urban part of the market, kind of like multi-unit style apartment inventory, and the price, like the way the prices are in the market has been really unusual. It's like 7 to 14 days is like the strongest window. You have a decent window outside of that, especially if you start to undercut the market. But then in like the 3 to 5 day window, the price can drop up to 50%. And you can't guarantee you'll fill your rooms. So there's like a total collapse in prices in the last minute. And because of that, I used to tell my revenue managers, you have to kind of have a belief about what's going on, and then you have to challenge your own belief. Because if you don't believe something, you can't act, but you have to make sure that that is maybe correct. And the belief that we have is that maybe that some, like a bunch of players in the market are holding their rates too high. They're really holding out for something that's not materializing, and then that's collapsing at the very last minute, making it a super competitive environment. And part of what they talked about doing in this situation is, one, really making sure that we book out, even if we leave a little bit money on the table a little earlier, was a big key. Another thing too was thinking about the cancellation policies so that people don't turn in that 24-hour period. They had very flexible cancellation policies. And what that caused was we were actually making reservations in the last 3 days, but we always lost a couple. And you ended up not hitting these like higher occupancy levels. So I think that there is, when we look at the markets and look at historical data too and how they're pacing, you also kind of have to think about, is the market optimized for the consumer as well? Because you could be in line with your comps, but if the whole market and you're pacing along with the market, but you're behind, that might be an indicator that the market itself isn't responding well to what the consumer is doing.
That's a really interesting one. I think what comes up a lot is, well, is it professional hosts are doing this well, but then like the individual hosts are, not pricing well. So what's your percentage in your market of professional operators? This is always a really interesting conversation, but someone with one home may have a great pricing tool and do this really well, right? So this generalization isn't totally true, but I find that conversation, I don't know, John, if that's where you were headed, but like, how smart is your market at actually pricing?
One thing we do, and this is another, hopefully you guys can look at this and take value to it. One thing we do, you guys are right on, okay? So one thing we do, we want to know our market in detail. And you mentioned earlier about transparent, because we use transparent in a lot of different ways, and key data and LSI, but we really break down our market. So we know self-renters, we know Evolve, we know the different management companies, and we know each of their supply. We know which management company is using a pricing tool, which management company is not. There's a large management company, I'm not going to say any names, that loves to drop rate in the last 10 days. We know that, and they drastically drop rates. So we're always looking, when we're looking at our competition, even with pricing tools, it's really good to understand who your competitors are. Like X management company has 150 supply, 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, etc. You should have that information and understand what their rates are and what their occupancy is, etc., because the tools are out there, and then break out in self-renters, Evolve, etc. So you truly understand how they're pricing. Some markets, I'll decide I'm going to be the market leader by far. I don't care what they're priced at. I'm going to lead the market in rate because I know there's demand to get there. And then some markets, I just have to be watching them very closely, following them a little bit more, plus minus 15, 10%, etc. But I'm always looking at those competitors to truly understand how they're priced, because you're exactly right, John. Some of these competitors might be pricing at the wrong price, and you have to not be a follower, you have to be a leader in a lot of these markets.
Yeah, we've seen that in the past as well, and we track our immediate competitors as well right here on Oak Island, very much like you're saying, Tom, and what you do, and it can affect what you're able to present. I mean, if they're pricing well below what the market can actually bear, now we have to undercut our rates because we look like we're priced out of line.
Oh, go ahead, Meaghan.
Sorry, I really resonate with what you said. Tracking your competitors versus trying to follow exactly what they're doing. And those two are so distinctly different. I think that understanding who your competitors are, how many units they have, what occupancy they have for specific weeks. And I saw someone in the chat asked how you do that. I mean, honestly, it was pretty old school the way that I've always done it. There are scraping tools that you can use to get the number of vacation rentals off of your competitors' websites, but on the occupancy side of things, I mean, it's pretty old school. Like, and if anybody has any better ideas, I'm super open to it. But just pulling the date and knowing, like, my competitor has 250 vacation rentals for the week of June 13th. They have 79 available properties. You are not going to have the full picture when you see that. I mean, it's very similar to use a scraping tool anyway with your own data, right? Like, you don't know how much of that is maintenance blocks or owners or whatever, but it gives you some type of picture. And I think that, there shouldn't be immediate alarm bells that you're doing something wrong if their occupancy is higher than you, but you have that information now. And I think having it is better than not having it in any case.
that little tidbit, I think, because there are a lot of tools. Heather gave us a lot of great tools. All the pricing systems also have some kind of tool set available to you to do this. But, that what you said, Meaghan, reminds me of like when I was working at Stay Alfred in the early days before everything was connected. It was like my boss would be like, I don't know what's going on in the market. He's like, just go onto their website and put in the dates and count how many search results are there. And then he made us write it down every week.
But on that, there was a good like hotel last minute question, right? Like what are you competing with? What should you do based on like what everyone else is doing? What's left to sell? And someone asked the question about like hotel versus short-term rental. I thought that was an interesting one. And when you discount, right, you want to say like, are you merchandising it too, or are you just dropping rate, right? Like lowering rate alone is not a form of promotion. So these options to like lower rate last minute and include, are you using promotional levers on channels that have them? That exists in both hotel and short-term rental in kind of different ways. But there's this other layer too of like a hotel room is a hotel room. In short-term rental, we have to think a little bit about, well, if it's a 1-bed condo, maybe dropping rate, I can sell it. But if it's a 5-bed home, even if you're dropping rate 14 days out,
Yeah,
you're just like, it's
yeah.
done, like it is over, right? That thing's not going to sell potentially. It's so understanding what is the definition of like a short-term window and a short-term discount by the property type starts to come into play.
You're right there, like John was saying about, and I was talking about booking windows, it's shorter term 14 days, but you really have to have a different strategy for your 3+. Then it goes up to 4-bedroom, your 5s, your booking windows are drastically different. So, that 14 days and under, it depends on your bedroom type. And if you're a 4 or 5, you're looking at 14 days as like 45 days to 60 days out, so you're really looking at those windows very much dramatically differently when it comes to bedroom type, for sure.
There was a question that is like amazing. Is that all right if we
read it out, Heather?
It was, do you think people would choose a listing with a higher review over a listing with a better price? And
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, but I thought that'd be good to
you guys go.
Direction. So you guys, Meaghan and Destiny said yes, like hands down, better review, they will pay more for it.
For sure. I mean,
And-
is the unit that's lower priced, do they have bad reviews or no in this case?
They're saying it's the same, maybe, but it has a higher review.
I think the part here is that like we have to, if we assume they're both competitively priced, then of course the review is going to, like, this is something I've been talking a lot of, like distribution and marketing coordination, which I'd like to come back to with you, Destiny, I think is a huge part of dealing with a downturn that people kind of have gotten lazy about over the last couple of years. But that's how you deal with like lower demand environments, as you coordinate those. The OTAs themselves, their only interest is to make a transaction. They don't care if they sell your product. They just need to make a sale. And so the factors they're going to look at are, one, that you're competitively priced. Like there's obviously a range there. 2, that you have evidence of making a transaction, whether that's through good reviews, whether that's through sales on your thing. That's why they give you that boost in the beginning. They're saying like, we don't know if this is a good property, so we'll pretend like it's transacted and see if it keeps transacting. If it doesn't, they're just like, put it in the back, right? And if there's not enough people looking, they just won't show you.
Mhm.
So reviews are definitely better because it proves to the channel that this is a transactable listing and people will pay for it within a certain range. But if you're like, I'm going to set this price to $10,000 and it should be $5,000 for a week, even if you're the best reviewed property and a super host, they're probably going to show something that they think is more likely to transact with that person looking at the website.
Our industry could really use more like research, like if we could pull some universities in to actually do some research or some other organizations. One of the theories I've talked about with other folks is because you don't have brand identity, like, that a Ritz-Carlton is better than a Holiday Inn, that it becomes even more critical. So I think there's a theory that it matters way more than you might even think. But I don't think there's like good research yet.
Yeah, I agree with that, guys. We really, when it comes to reviews, we really look at, like you were saying, you know, the 5-star reviews compared to bedroom type and premium luxury, you know, you kind of have to break it down by categories, you know, premium, luxury, standard, et cetera. But we lump the 4.8s to 5s in the same category if it's in that category. So we're not going to lump a 4.8 that's a standard property home with a premium or luxury, but then we lump them into these categories. And then when we're doing our comp sets, which Transparent can, you know, does a really good job with, we're really digging in to the comp set. So we go really granular with properties. So if it's a home, we usually do, you know, find a comp set for them if we can. And then we'll look at, like, if it's this home's reviews are 4.8 to 5, our competitors are normally at that same 4.8 to 5. So we're comparing apples to apples with pricing, because if you're doing all this work with putting good comp sets together for your units, but it takes a lot of time. And some people just don't want to be great because it takes that much time to do it effectively. And what you need to do is you really have to dig in when you're setting these comp sets up to say, okay, how many are 4.8 to 5? How many have like amenities as I do? Is some of these competitors overpriced or underpriced? Who do I want, you know, to be in this comp set? And you really put these comp sets together. So when you're looking at the data and you're comparing yourself to the competitors, you're really looking at true data that the customer is going to purchase you on, where your impressions on Vrbo and Airbnb are going to be similar impressions to your competitors, and you're showing up on the same impression order as they do.
Yeah, and just to clarify as well, it looks like they came in with 30% higher for a 4.2 versus a 4.8. I don't necessarily agree with a correlation in that either. I do think if you have a comparable property and you're looking at apples to apples, one has good reviews and the other has either no reviews or bad reviews. I think especially with all of the publicity for, you know, Airbnb horror stories, I think now people value what they're paying for their vacation. They're more price sensitive and they would pay a little more to know that they're going to get a good product in the end, but not 30% more.
Yeah, I did. My eyes went a little bit big when I saw 30%,
Yeah.
but I do think it makes a measurable difference, even 10 to 15% higher.
I'd agree with that.
Do you guys have, and I'd like to hear about your coordination, Destiny, with your marketing team and your rev team, but do you guys have processes in place as part of your revenue management practices to deal with review or distribution strategy as well?
Yep, we do.
What do you guys put in place?
We weekly make sure that, you know, for Airbnb, we're leaving reviews, same thing for Vrbo. We're looking at those reviews and coordinating with marketing if responses need to be issued. And then if we fall behind, of course, we lean on marketing, revenue management marketing. We've really tried to kind of build that out where they work hand in hand a lot. And then, you know, our next step is going to try to tie reservations in.
That's great. Meaghan, do you have processes among your team to deal with that? Or is that, you know, sometimes it might even fall on your responsibility?
Yeah, we do have processes. I think we hold a weekly revenue meeting, which I've been using the same format. I saw that Jason Sprinkle was on the call. So he actually created this like 8 years ago. And essentially we sit in a room once a week. We would do it about every 10 days. And this is pre-key data. Now key data is an integral part of all of those meetings. A revenue manager is present. Our director of reservations is present. We call it sales crew at Outpost. And then our director of marketing is also present. And occasionally our owner comes into those meetings as well. And they're really structured to every single person, right? Like we consider them to be responsible for their own specific department in terms of what our bookings are looking like for a specific season. So the marketing director, her responsibility is to come prepared to that meeting with the last email that we sent out, what the statistics were of that email, what the open rate was, how our our Google ads are performing, what type of promotions, even whether it be social or email, that we're going to be running in the next week before our meeting is coming up. And then the reservations team, I ask her, like, okay, what's the pulse on the phones? What are you getting when you're talking to guests? How many discount requests are you getting? What type of notable open leads do we have right now? What type of leads have we lost for notable properties in the last week, and why? And really, we use it as an opportunity to hold accountability to all of those team members and just get on the same page about what our strategy is moving forward. And it's been really, really successful. I think that it makes everybody think as they go throughout their weeks, like, I'm going to have to sit in front of everybody on Tuesday at 2 p.m. and let them know what I've done this past week to ensure that our bookings are increasing week over week. And then usually I give a high level budget update as well.
Yeah, we're doing in our weekly meetings pretty much everything that you just said as well. And I think it's instrumental. I think if there's a company not doing it, it's worth the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you are a business owner, or if you're running a business on the call, if you're not sitting in on those meetings, you should be. I think that it is, if you're trying to figure out like how you need to spend your time as someone who's responsible for multiple departments, and you're trying to structure your meetings for the week, like, I would put that to be number one.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly how we structured it at Stay Offered. I actually went to the CEO and told him to move the revenue org under our CMO. And we met weekly. Revenue would give an analysis of what's been going on from a budgetary perspective and revenue. We would highlight different areas, and then the distribution and the marketing team and the revenue team and the sales team would talk about how to approach dealing with what we thought was going on, or maybe in some cases pushing back against it too.
Looks like there's a question related to, if you're a smaller operator, right? Maybe you don't have an in-house marketing team or even a third party. You're more like bootstrapping, doing everything yourself. And I do think there's some phases to, if you are trying to do marketing at some level, right? So you bring marketing into the conversation, you bring distribution in the conversation, but that could look different. Maybe you don't really have a good book direct strategy with an email database, but you still can kind of cover, I think, all the parts of the meeting that Meaghan and Destiny spoke to. So ideally, you at least have a partner and you're not holding a meeting with yourself, even as a small operator, because it definitely helps to have conversation as part of like how you're developing your strategy or your next move. But just wanted to respond to that one.
That's a great point. If feel free to like pull us back to this conversation if you guys have a little bit more you'd like to say. I did want to talk about, because this started to come up in our last conversation. Tom brought it up before this, but are any of you guys looking at your fees or your fee structures or your cancellation policies in this current market? Like, is that forcing a look at that? What are you seeing? What are you doing?
You want me to, I can talk a little bit about what we're seeing. Again, I think the fees are really a big deal. We have all these great pricing tools, but if we don't understand the fees of our competitors and what our fees are, there's so many times I'll go and, review different destinations where, the fees are, 60% of the room rate compared to some management companies, they're 30. They're all over the place. And we know self-renters have a tendency and Evolve have a tendency to go less fees. So you have to really, truly understand that when you're setting up these fee structures. It's a major profit center for property management companies, owners, et cetera. We realize that. It's hard to let go of profit, okay? But if you can show these property management companies, so we have franchises and we manage and own others, if you can show them that if we decrease the damage waiver or the booking fee by X%, we gain so many extra room nights increase because of the decreases to get us back in line percent-wise to fees, we'll gain extra rooms automatically, get more money in the long run because, bookings, et cetera. The fees are attached to more bookings than overall revenue. So, the return is you're going to get more revenue, even though it looks like we're going to lose more. In return, we're going to gain more. So you have to put together a forecast, really analyze how you can have almost the same amount of profit, but change the fee structure, so there's things because you're going to get more room nights, and you have to explain that to the, the owner of the management company, et cetera.
So this is like total paid price. Ultimately, what is guest total paid price? What does the guest see? Is another way I feel like Tom saying the same thing you're saying. And how the guest sees that has evolved too.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to keep watching that, right? Like Vrbo and Airbnb, the guest can say, show me just total paid price. So then kind of the rent and fee, whatever that mix is, somewhat goes out the window, because it's just the guest is choosing to view that on step one of the search versus that drip pricing thing that can exist. And we've gotten away from that. And there's legal reasons why I think industries have to get away from that. But that does change. I think that also influences how we think about managing price. Do we have to really think more about like guest total paid price? Because that's how the searches are being done. But it's and
the consumer pre-COVID, the consumer wasn't as savvy as they are now. They might never experience the vacation rental pre-COVID. So now they're a lot more savvier. They are comparing your fees. They don't value the fees. They don't see any value at all in them. So if you're doing a price analysis and your fees are a lot higher, then you really have to make a big decision on, do you change your fee structure or you change your pricing strategy? Because more and more consumers are judging, comparing fees, compare one to the next. And then on top of that, how Airbnb puts fees into the rate, some, fees, and Vrbo puts fees, etc. You have this big gamut because, we somewhat believe in website parity, rate parity.
Now that's whole hotel thinking, right, Tom? That is the Wild West.
I know. But we don't go there all the way like a hotel. But because you don't want to be pricing yourself in three different, your big levers is Airbnb, Vrbo, and your website, right? Brand direct. So what you're really trying to do is, I see a lot of competitors, Vrbo is $1,200. Airbnb is $1,300. Your website is $900. Well, how do you really then have a pricing strategy? You really don't. You're just kind of throwing darts at the dartboard.
Well, ultimately, you have a book direct advantage, right? That's one thing you're calling out. Like,
it
what's
is.
your book
It's
direct
for
advantage?
sure the advantage, but you really shouldn't be, because you're really pricing when you're making pricing decisions. Unless you're going very deep granular and strategies on Vrbo, Airbnb, and your brand direct, you're really making pricing decisions overall. So if your rate is so much higher on Vrbo or to your brand direct, you got to have some threshold of percent that you're able to manage your pricing effectively, because you could be pricing yourself out of the market in those other channels. Because we do definitely, our brand direct is how do we get 50% share, is always the goal, right? And if you can get that, that's great. But that's not always the likelihood if your management company is not that big, your website impressions, etc. So you're maybe getting more share from others. But if you're pricing yourself so much lower on your site, but the consumer never sees it, but you're basing your pricing decisions on your website, then you might be pricing yourself out of the market.
Like if you're overpriced on Vrbo or Airbnb, you don't get the billboard effect.
Right.
Exactly. Yep.
I've seen some
question. Yeah, is it that what you're going to bring up on the percentage booking fee versus a flat fee? Such a good question. I would always choose a flat fee versus a percentage fee. So here's the thing with the percentage fee and why I have been against it so far. And I think my mind could potentially be changed if someone made a good argument, but someone who's already paying a lot of money for a house, typically the house is larger and you already have a fat housekeeping fee on there. I mean, there were properties, right, that have a $750 housekeeping fee, $900 housekeeping fees. And I think housekeeping fees are very, very interesting because I have a strong opinion that that should be the second most profitable side of your business. And so if it's not, like, continuously trying to understand how much money you're spending on housekeepers and the cost in order to clean those properties on cleaning supplies, and yes, I just like that. Some of these cons have been pretty funny. Anyway, so a tangent on housekeeping fees, but percentage versus flat fee. Percentage wise, it's going to be larger every time. And I would rather see that money on the housekeeping side and not add an additional really, really large fee. I would recommend a tiered approach on a flat fee. So whether it be $99 for tier 1, which are your lowest price properties, $129 for those mid-tier properties, and $159 for those higher tiers. I think you get less bulking that way. And it's easier for you to kind of keep track of what that fee really looks like versus a percentage fee, which varies based on the seasonality.
The layer, though, is the length of stay, right? So like your perception of, the guest perception of, is it a high fee or not? Even like you said, a high cleaning fee in a large home doesn't look that high if I'm staying 7 nights, but if I stay 3, now all of a sudden is it 40 or 50% of my total paid price. I do think the housekeeping part of our industry could keep evolving in that if we hire contractors that we pay to clean a home and it's a fee, it just is, we're not paying hourly, like, you know, then you attach that same fee to just cover your cost. But if you were to pay an hourly rate, we might think differently about, and charging percent might be okay, right? Because someone's staying longer, maybe it's more likely to actually take longer to clean. So it is an interesting thing how that length of stay part, I think, factors into a lot of what you're saying too.
Yeah, I definitely recommend segregating that out based on whether it's a 7-night stay or longer, or less than a 7-night stay, because what'll happen as well is you'll undercut your owner. You know, if you're tacking on the same fees on a 3-night stay as you would for a 7-night stay, in order to get somebody to book and to be in line with your competition, you're going to have to lower that actual rent revenue.
But your housekeeping overhead is the same whether the guest stays 3 nights or 7 nights, right? And that's where it
well, if you have in-house and you pay hourly, your cost might be different.
Yeah,
that's where that flips a little bit.
Yeah. I'm talking more about like booking fees, for example. If you're going to charge an administrative fee, I definitely recommend on a 3-night stay charging a lower fee than you would on a 7-night stay.
Yeah.
I actually think
one
that
thing we do is that you really have to segment out your bedroom types. You know, your 1 and 2 bedrooms are normally, your average length of stay might be 2.6. Your 3 and 4s that are 4.5, 4.6. So if you're doing static R%, or, you know, you really have to look at that, because you could be outpricing yourself. You know, your 3 and 4 bedrooms, all of a sudden you're doing great on, but your 1 and 2 bedrooms, you're not really doing well because your fee structure's all over the place, where you're outpricing yourself on fees in the marketplace. You really want to look at, you know, we look at dynamic floor when we do percents. So especially on larger homes, you don't want that. If you're charging a 3% booking fee, you know, and they're staying X amount, then it could get really large. So you kind of really want to look at floors when it comes to percents, and understand those, but you have to really break it down by that bedroom type, because your length of stay windows are so much different.
Yeah, I think, you know, I actually think that the total price thing will make it easier for us from a revenue management perspective. And I think that the downstream effect of that is that percentage fees become easier to track how you're competing in the market, because you see exactly how much you're taking out of the rent, right? But I think a lot of people have a lot of fixed fees, and we know that people do a lot of fees to move around the accounting with on their PM side. And what you have to consider, I think, a realistic situation that might be occurring now is, hey, I used to always sell 7-night stays. I need to open this up for 3 nights because the market's getting shorter. That means you need to review your fee structure, because your price is actually higher if you have a big fixed lump of fees in there for that stay. And that's where, from the revenue management side, really understanding your fee structure can be important, because if you have to change a policy like minimum length of stay, or you think it would be beneficial, your actual price that you're marketing at is going to be at a different level of competition than the kind of target minimum length of stay you would set your fee structure up originally for. The other thing too, I've seen a few people talk about like, you know, how they mark up or how the channels charge and that kind of thing. And one thing I say to people, you know, if you're smaller, you do the markups because you don't want to pay, because you don't have to worry about channel mix. You can really just optimize for the most profitable channel. But the customer doesn't care how much you pay for a reservation. So by tacking those on, what you're basically saying is, you know, if you overprice yourself, you're just saying, I don't want to take this channel because it's too expensive for me. The larger you get, the less flexibility you have to do that. And you should really think of channel markups, those kind of fees, really as a control on your distribution, not as a strategy for your pricing.
Well said. That's exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I saw someone ask, like, why even charge a booking fee? I think guests hate them. And I mean, credit card fees have a lot to play into that, whether you want to call it a booking or an admin fee. I know that some people have split credit card fees with homeowners, and some vacation rental companies absorb those fees altogether. And if you're using a processor like Stripe, which surprisingly enough, some people do, like, that is a lot of money. And so if you can make it up in a booking fee to a guest, I mean, you're not just passing it along. I think you can, not to get a 100% of the revenue, but to try to alleviate the cost of those credit card fees.
I mean, it's kind of in the hotel industry years ago, there was starting to charge urban fees. It would be like resort fees,
Yeah.
fees. What am I getting? What does that include? Like Wi-Fi? There you have a concierge, like, but people do pay it. It is an interesting thing to test. But ultimately going to total guest paid price is kind of a game changer if that's just how things start working.
Yeah. Rolled up. Agreed.
All right, so we are a little over. I wish we had, this was a great conversation. Thanks for presenting this topic to us, Tom. We all got, I think, even a little like,
I can keep going when it comes to this topic. I think the total paid price, that's what we're looking, that's our future. That's what we're looking at in a lot of markets. We're not there yet, but I think it's going there. It's evolving. So yeah, well said, guys.
Totally agree. So really appreciate everyone coming today. Just so you guys know, we do this monthly. I'm going to go back around and you guys just introduce yourself again and say where you're from. Also, we don't answer a lot of questions on these chats. I'll think about maybe putting together a Q&A revenue manager roundtable where we take some of the questions from here and maybe have some spot. I like to just let people talk about what's on their mind here, but appreciate everyone coming. Tom, you want to start us, go around the horn, just say where you're from? And
yeah, our main office is in Arizona, so with Casago. Yep.
Meaghan?
Sure. Hi, I'm Meaghan. I'm with Outpost in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Destiny?
I'm Destiny. I'm with Oak Island Accommodations in Oak Island, North Carolina.
Heather?
And I'm Heather Richer with RicherLogic. We support folks globally.
And I'm John DeRelay with Wheelhouse, and we are also worldwide. Appreciate all your time today, and thank you to the panelists as well. Catch you next time.
Thanks, John.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.